I've been sitting next to Dylan Mortimer, who turned 40 years old on Thursday. Happy belated birthday. It's a milestone for someone with CF, and Dylan will kind of fill you in on his unbelievable journey. And I will just tell you, he's here because he had a second double lung transplant in April. And he's also an amazing artist. You might have noticed his artwork at the silent auction, but he has art all across the country, and he's known for his really sparkly, beautiful artwork. So I will let you hear more about his story. Here's Dylan.
Good evening, everybody. I can't possibly express how good it is to be here, how good it is to be alive at all, how good it is to breathe after I've been through it. It's amazing to see the support and generosity of all of you that support a foundation like the Bonnell Foundation that has practically helped me, that has spiritually, emotionally helped me to even be alive to 40 years. How about that, right? 40, I mean, so we say it's like 82 and regularly, CF years is like 82, and I love it. Love being 82, it's awesome. This is my family over here. So my wife Shannon, son Noah, son Liam, our dog Maxwell. They're 10 and 8, our boys. My wife and I have been married for 14 years. These are all things just absolutely inconceivable. When I was born in 1979, nobody was telling me to think about marriage or if anything, it was like, maybe you could think about college, you could possibly, perhaps entertain that idea. We have come such a long way, have we not? And there's more to go, and we're doing it right now. So thank you all for being here. What I want to share with you is my journey in regards to my expression about the trauma and hope that is cystic fibrosis. So this first image was the first thing I did in response to that. Like Claire, I grew up with I didn't necessarily want people to know I had cystic fibrosis. This is pretty common if you know really anybody in the CF game. It's just not so you don't really want pity, you don't want everything to be about all that. I didn't really want to wrestle with the identity politics of it all. But my lung function got to a point, we started talking about transplant, and it felt dishonest not to bring it in some way. And so I created this image. This is about 4 feet by 8 feet, foam corrugated plastic on the side. It was I was making signs at the time, and I shifted. All my training and everything was in art school, but I shifted to kind of dealing with this. So the title of this piece is I Want More Air, with an exclamation point. That's the title. And so it was this idea of a bronchial tree with extended, almost in this surrealistic way, this Baroque way, branches on top of, more than a normal bronchial tree would have. Because I want not just to survive, but to thrive, right? I want to breathe more than possible. So it started kind of with that image, and you can go to the next. It just kind of continued from there to creating these shapes. At the time, these are, dimensionally all kind of in the range of 4 by 8, huge sign installations. This one had flashing lights in it. I used a lot of shoes, Air Jordan shoes specifically, because there's air in the shoes. And so I really was like doing a Google search for Air Max or Maximum Air one day or something, and all these Air Max shoes comes up. And of course, these were like the shoes of my generation growing up in the 80s and 90s, and still are. Everybody wanted to have Air Jordans. Everybody wants to breathe. There's air in the lungs, there's air in the shoes kind of have the shape of lungs. It's just this whole thing, and it worked out. So this piece is called 65 Roses, which in art circles I have to explain, like there's this whole thing, 65 roses, but you all get what this is about. So I made this in a hospital stay where we were talking about transplant and all that. When I say made it, I cut out the roses and started, collaging components. I think there's another shot of this this is some of the installation view of that show. So this exhibition was the first thing I did. It was called Cure, and it was the first kind of time where I wrestled with this notion of me having cystic fibrosis and what that means. So if you go to the next one. This actually was done for Vertex. I started on Orkambi this drug that they developed that dramatically helped. And so it was my imagination of like my cells having a party, like this is what they look like on our cam. I felt better, and it was, but it was, if you keep going there. Oh yeah, this is at Vertex too. That piece, I want more air, is installed there in Boston at Vertex. And this was, also a related image. These two pieces, I think I have one of them at least, that's was called 661, so, which is related to the trial for Symdeko coming out soon. This, bronchial trees and halos and all, so it's all glitter on top of glitter on top of glitter. People have a love-hate relationship with glitter, kind of like they do with CF, It's just like, it's beautiful, it's dirty, it's ugly, and so the whole thing is like, I felt like my life from when I was diagnosed at 3 months old has been sprinkling glitter over a really ugly diagnosis and trying to transform and change what would seem to be hopeless into something hopeful. But that's kind of what we're all doing, whether we have CF or not, right? We're always trying to take challenges and trauma and ugly parts of our life and transforming them into things that are beautiful, that are hopeful, that are glorious. So if we go to the next one, so this is the image that's back there, the tree of life. So just an inverted bronchial tree that is kind of mashed with a stained glass window. So it's kind of this vision of like this hopeful, this is what every CF patient is searching for, this like healed, restored, or renewed beautiful bronchial tree that just glistens and shines. So yeah, these are more dimensional pieces. This is welded aluminum now, healthy cells, Jordans with lights in them. That version of that bronchial tree done in a sculptural way. This is an installation called the Congregation. So I was thinking about communities like this, of like multiple bronchial trees interwoven together that help heal, communicate, find cures, raise money, raise hope. And you'll notice there's dripping phlegm from all the trees. This is 52 feet wide, yeah. So there's, because it's like a literal version of an airway clearance treatment, you're trying to invert the bronchial tree and get the phlegm off of there. So, my doctors was like, that's cool. Like, okay. So this recently was installed in KU Med in Kansas City, and at most of the length of that. They didn't have a wall that could fit it all, but so it was really interesting before there's a description put up to hear med students talking about it. Is that a representation of an acid trip? Is that, like, this is me at the opening of that show on oxygen. It was kind of the end of my lungs, my natural born lungs. And so I made it to the opening. I had been coughing up blood and couldn't quite stop, and was going in and out of hospitals for that, but I was able to make it to the opening and then had to go back in the hospital the next day for another embolization, and it was just time, and they ambulanced me from Kansas City to St. Louis to be listed for new lungs. So the next picture is my x-ray before and after. Old lungs, new lungs. And so, again, this unspeakably profound experience that you can never possibly put to words. So I make these images to try to navigate the experience, the emotion, the feeling of what it's like at each stage, and here to breathe for the first time. And a common question is like, what was that first breath like? Was it just incredible? It was, but it was also the most painful thing I had ever experienced. If you go to the next picture, here's me, as you do when you receive a lung transplant, pushing all your gear, trying to walk, and you've got 2 dedicated people or more to disentangle all the cables that are on you. But more pain than I've ever experienced, but simultaneously more gratitude than I could have ever experienced. And it's different for everybody, the journey, but for me, the gratitude far outweighed the trauma and the pain that was involved in it, because someone had just given me their lungs. Is this unspeakably humbling gift, and I'm hearing people life flighted in, and the ICU unit that I'm in, going, man, I don't know if they're alive. And so I'm praying for people while I'm in like the most pain ever in my life. This is life, right? Like that we can receive things far beyond what we could do for ourselves, and notice pain and trauma of others, even when we're in pain and trauma ourselves, and that helps us empathize and do things we never could have imagined. So next one, naturally, I'm in the hospital drawing pictures of my scar. that's now running across my chest because like this crazy new sort of visual inspiration. So I see it as this sort of glorious symbol of you would never wish that on anyone, You don't want anybody to have scars ever, and yet they become the very vehicles of healing, wounds that actually heal. It's kind of what heals you, but it also becomes a vehicle for healing mentally, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. The process of going through those things become the very means by which we grow in ways that maybe we otherwise wouldn't have. You wouldn't wish scars on anybody, but they become the wounds that heal. And so this was the first larger kind of piece I did post-transplant, was this kind of scar in the sky shining down on the snake. So this is, the piece was called Shine Like Scars in the Sky. Are we preaching yet? So you shine like the scar you are. So the next one, DNA chains and Jordans stomping on these snakes that had DNA, there's DNA like on the snakes. And this is all cut paper layers, so kind of meticulous. They're all cut and then painted and glittered separately and all collaged together. So it becomes this whole, Baroque influenced art on top of art kind of thing. Next slide. Forest of healthy cells and DNA, and just kind of imagining, trying to get my mind around like what it felt like to breathe in a more full way for the first time really in my life. And I'd sort of been doing these depictions and things related to the disease, but now what does it look like to really feel regenerated, to feel better? And so if you keep going, this is a rendition of the surgery, right? So this is about 5 feet by 4 feet. These are all now, like pretty like flat but collage panels. So these are framed. And this is now at Barnes in St. Louis where the first surgery was. So all these healthy cells are kind of flowing down. The doctors sort of all have halos that are like the cellular form. So it's kind of this mash of science and faith and all these things. I'm wearing Air Jordans on the operating table, which they didn't really let me do, but in my imagination, that's how it happened. There's air happening there. So next, if you go to the next one, just a side shot to kind of get a sense of the dimension and scale and the physicality of the paper kind of coming off. This was an installation in Salina, Kansas, that was 55 feet at a new medical building. And so the whole idea, if you can see on either side, there's a scar. On either side, so it was sort of my imagination of like, they cut me straight across and open, and so when you're open, you're watching kind of the healing happen in between the two scars. So the motto of Kansas is something to do with, from the stars, from the ground to the stars, and so this is from the scars to the stars. Like you're watching transformation happen before you. So yeah, keep going. Okay, so. I was feeling so good. Family talked about it together. So let's move back to New York City where we had lived before. I'm feeling incredible. Let's do this. They find rejection 1 week before I move in the new lungs. So we're sort of devastated, but not quite sure what this means. We go ahead and move to New York, and my lung function went from 97% in June to 20% in November. So there's a rapid decline. New York's a hard enough city anyway to move to, and it's kind of hard with kids to move there. But to move and your lung function is dropping daily was unreal. One of the first visits was you're going to need to have a second lung transplant. So they placed me on the list again in January, this past January. But because of the antibodies I've had, I was screening out 70% of potential donors. So there was, this. It's unlikely we're going to find a match for you. And we'll do everything we can, but it may be years. What happened in the end was a will donation from Kansas City, of all cities, like my spiritual animal city. Someone called saying like, hey, our cousin just passed and we have lungs, we'd like to will them to you. And my response is like, that's incredible. Thank you for thinking of me. I'll be praying for your family. That's not how this works. There's a list and you have to get on it and all that. And she goes, no, we're still going to try. So my doctor calls the next day going, it's a match. It's a match in every way, which is, I'm like, do you understand the likelihood that this could happen? 0.0000, whatever it is. So, the second surgery happened. Everything went better than the first surgery. So all of this, both the trauma, the joy, just all of it, now I'm feeling the best that I ever have again. 5 months post, thank you. 5 months post. So I'm trying to soak in all of that whilst being cognizant of the fact that that is not how it is for everyone via transplant or cystic fibrosis or whatever. So I step into both the trauma and the joy, and that's what the artwork strives to kind of navigate and meld both of those. So this tree image, why I have a picture of a tree up here, as I was going through this, there was this festival in a park where artists from around the world were invited to do a project in the park. So my idea was to revive a dying tree, to paint it pink and glitter it, like my bronchial tree. So that happened, and people thought it was cool, like, oh, that's sort of like your life. Now, the inside story is we picked out a tree, and then the city calls me. Actually, when we pick out this old tree, the city is trimming it and all these things. The city calls me with, hey, or actually I get a call while I'm watching them trim the tree, and that was where I found out about the rejection. Like, these lungs are not going to work, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So then, I go home, and later I get a call from the city going, yeah, that tree is not going to work out. It's too close to a road, it's not safe. And so I go, okay, what do we need to come out and trim some branches? And they go, well, we cut it down. Like, what? So they're like, we need you to come back and pick out another tree. So I go to pick out another tree. So of course the metaphor is not lost on me, that this first tree that is experiencing rejection, I need to find another tree. So we find this tree that looked even more like a bronchial tree, had even more resonance to that, and we choose that, and that becomes the one that we trim and get it clean and paint and glitter. So that happens, and then next picture, the tree comes back to life. Amen. And all of this was totally planned. No. We didn't know that in sealing the tree with paint and glitter, like the moisture kind of shot up to the ends, and there's green growth on the top of it. So the correlations of this physical tree with my life have been, but this was completed while going through rejection and getting listed again. So I had this sort of like hope that, like, okay, that tree was revived, and that was the second tree, that maybe there's another tree out there for me. So it became true in every facet of the world, and I stand here alive and humbled and grateful to every single one of you involved in the fight. I hope that you know that what you're doing in supporting the Bonnell Foundation and organizations like it, but especially tonight the Bonnell Foundation, whom I received a transplant grant from, you are practically keeping people like me alive. But what you are doing more than that is giving hope to people like me in that situation who had no reason to hope. Right, who had no earthly, like, kind of cognitive reason to have any hope. There was not lungs for me. There was, 0.000 chance that there'd be any match for me out there. And in spite of that, in that spot is where the Bonnell Foundation and all of you supporting came to provide hope to a seemingly hopeless situation. We are in the business of sparking hope where there would otherwise be none. True? Are you with me? Yeah. So I just say, like, know that as you are doing the practical support and the help with medical bills and transplant grants and all these things are obvious. I mean, that's practical support. But what you're doing in your gesture is giving hope to people like me that, like, there otherwise might be none. So there are many CF patients facing that wall exactly, and you help them push them through. The last picture, again, just my family and I am blown away by their support of me, by the fact that I could be, yes, yeah. They couldn't make it tonight because my kids are 10 and 8, and it would just be mayhem in here. But next time, they will be here, and the dog would just eat all the food. It just, But the fact that we, cystic fibrosis, could be loved in this way blows our minds, And it's a microcosm for everybody in all of humanity. Like the good news is like that you are loved precisely in the places it would seem you would be unlovable. So thank you for your love and support of me, everybody at the Bonnell Foundation. I'm incredibly excited to be alive, if you can't tell. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.